I used to think that a mother's heart could only break once, the day she gives her child away in marriage. I remember holding my son, Arjun, in my arms on his wedding day, feeling that bittersweet mixture of pride and sorrow. I told myself that no matter how far he went, how independent he became, he would always come back to me. That love once sown never withers. I was wrong. The day Arjun died, my world didn't just crack, it shattered into 1,000 irreparable pieces. It was sudden, a heart attack in the early morning hours. One moment he was laughing at a trivial joke I'd made, the next moment he was gone. I remember the way the phone rang and how my hands trembled as I picked it up. I still hear the words, "Ma, it's Arjun, he's gone." I don't think I truly grieved that moment. I was frozen in disbelief. The funeral arrangements blurred into a surreal haze. Flowers, condolences, tears I shed mechanically while watching others cry. I kept looking at Riya, his wife, expecting her to fall into my arms to share my despair, but she didn't. There was a hollowness in her eyes, a coldness I hadn't seen before. Perhaps I wanted to deny it, but deep down I knew that looked too well. It was relief. The house, once vibrant with Arjun's laughter, felt unbearably empty. His favorite chair by the window sat unused. The small pile of newspapers he would raid in the mornings lay untouched. Even the scent of his cologne lingered ghostly, making me ache. I wandered through rooms he once filled with life, imagining the echoes of his voice, his footsteps on the staircase. Every corner whispered his absence, and then there was Riya. For days she maintained a polite facade, a thin veneer of grief that barely covered her eagerness to reclaim the life she wanted without him. I caught her checking her phone incessantly, smiling at messages, making plans. It was subtle at first, a smirk when she thought I wasn't looking, a dismissive gesture when I entered a room. But soon it became blatant. One afternoon, while I was carefully folding his clothes to pack them for safekeeping, she spoke to me as though we were strangers sharing a public space. "Ma," she said, her tone clipped and impatient, "you should start thinking about moving out. This house, it's too big for two people." I froze. "This is Arjun's home," I said, my voice shaking. "Our home." She smiled, but it was not the smile of kindness or understanding. It was sharp, edged with satisfaction. "Arjun is gone," she replied softly, "and as his wife, this house legally belongs to me. You can take your things, whatever is yours, and leave peacefully." Her words pierced me deeper than I could ever describe. I wanted to argue, to shout, to demand that she show even the smallest shred of decency. But my body refused. My grief had hollowed me out, leaving only a fragile shell of the mother I once was. I packed my memories instead. The small things, a silk scarf Arjun loved, photographs from his childhood, his favorite books, each item a relic of a life that could never return. I wrapped them carefully, whispering prayers under my breath. The weight of loss was heavy, but the weight of betrayal was unbearable. As I stepped out of that house for the last time, I closed the door gently behind me, as though I could preserve some fragment of the life we had shared. I whispered into the empty hallway, "Wherever you are, my son, watch what she does next." The world outside was cold and unwelcoming. I hailed a cab with trembling hands, my suitcase packed with not just possessions, but the weight of a mother's sorrow. I had nowhere to go, yet I knew I had to move forward. Somehow, someway, I had to survive. And yet, even as I walked away from the house, from the memories, and from the woman who had betrayed me, I felt a tiny ember of something stubborn flicker inside me. It was a quiet, burning determination. Arjun had always believed in justice, in fairness, even when life seemed cruel. Maybe, just maybe, I could honor his memory by holding on to that ember, because life had taken everything from me. And I swore, silently, it would never take my dignity. The small room I found was nothing like the house I had lived in for decades. A narrow bed with a sagging mattress, a wobbly wooden table, a single dim bulb hanging from the ceiling, and a tiny window that barely let in the sun. It was enough barely to survive, but it was a far cry from the home that had been filled with Arjun's laughter, warmth, and memories. I unpacked my few belongings slowly, each item a reminder of what I had lost. A photo of Arjun as a boy, grinning with mischief, his favorite sweater folded carefully, a silk scarf he had once worn on a cold winter morning. Every object was a thread tying me to a past that Riya had tried to erase. The first night was the hardest. I lay on the narrow bed, listening to the faint sounds of the neighborhood, children shouting, vendors calling out, dogs barking. In the silence of that room, I felt the weight of my isolation pressed down on me. Riya's words from that day in the house echoed repeatedly in my mind. You can take your things, whatever is yours, and leave peacefully. There was no warmth, no hesitation, no shred of compassion in her tone, just finality. I survived the first few days on my dwindling savings. Some days I skipped meals, convincing myself it was a form of penance. Other days I sat by the small window with a cup of tea, staring at the distant city streets, imagining that Arjun had prepared it himself. The illusion comforted me for a little while, though it could never replace him. Neighbors were kind in their own way, but their pity was suffocating. Poor woman, I overheard one neighbor whisper to another as I walked past, thrown out by her own daughter-in-law. The words stung, not because they were untrue, but because I had once considered myself above such judgment. I had always believed that love and family would protect me. I was wrong. Riya, meanwhile, thrived in the life she had claimed for herself. I saw her photos online, posted by friends and acquaintances, her smiling brightly in a new dress, showing off a new car, attending glamorous social gatherings. She looked unburdened, triumphant, as if Arjun's death had freed her instead of breaking her. The thought of her enjoying the life that should have been shared with me filled me with a bitter ache. And yet, through all this, I could not bring myself to hate her entirely. Arjun had loved her, and in the end, that was something I could not deny. I had to believe that somewhere, somehow, his love and wisdom had a plan to protect me from her cruelty. Then, one morning, a call came that would change everything. Mrs. Mira Kapoor, the voice asked politely. "This is Mr. Sharma, Arjun's lawyer. We will be reading your son's will next Monday at 10 a.m. You are required to attend." The words hung in the air like a delicate, dangerous promise. I hadn't even known that Arjun had written a will. The thought that he had planned something, even from beyond the grave, gave me a strange sense of hope, cautious, fragile, but enough to steady my trembling hands. I spent the rest of the week preparing. I bought a simple white sari, clean and unassuming, and polished my shoes. I wanted to appear dignified, not defeated. I wanted to face Riya, not with anger, but with a quiet certainty that the past few weeks had not broken me entirely. When the day arrived, I entered the lawyer's office quietly. Riya was already there, radiant and composed, her smile dripping with smug satisfaction. She noticed me immediately. "Oh, you came," she said, her tone sharp, edged with mockery. "I was wondering if you could afford the taxi fare." "I took the bus," I replied evenly, ignoring the barb. "Well, don't worry," she said, leaning back in her chair, fingers steepled. "After today, you won't even have to worry about paying for rent. You'll have nothing to pay for." Her words were deliberate, meant to wound, and they did, but I kept my face still. I had left the house without a scene. I would not give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble now. Mr. Sharma entered, clearing his throat. The air was thick with tension. I could feel Riya's eyes on me, full of contempt and expectation. I settled into my chair, clutching the small photograph of Arjun I had brought. It was the only shield I had against the storm of emotions threatening to overwhelm me. As the lawyer began reading the will, Riya's smugness grew. Every mention of property, every asset accounted for, seemed to thrill her. And then came the line I had feared, the line where she expected to revel in her triumph. "I hope you enjoy being homeless because I made sure you get nothing." She said it to me directly, leaning forward with a grin that was equal parts cruelty and arrogance. But I remained silent, as calm as I could, my lips pressed together. I knew deep down that there was more to this will than she realized, because Arjun had always been clever. Arjun had always loved me, and I had learned in the quiet hours of my grief that sometimes the greatest strength lies in patience, in waiting for the moment when justice can finally be delivered. The room was silent except for the soft shuffle of papers and the occasional cough. I sat quietly, clutching the small photograph of Arjun in my purse, feeling the weight of every memory pressing against my chest. The air smelled faintly of polished wood and old leather, the kind of smell that always reminded me of my son's study, of afternoons when he would sit there reading for hours while I hummed in the kitchen. Riya sat across from me, her posture perfect, her smile smug, as though she had already won the lottery of life. She glanced at me once, her eyes sparkling with malice. "I hope you're ready, Ma," she whispered, her tone dripping with condescension. "Because today you'll see exactly what nothing looks like." I ignored her. I had learned in these past weeks that silence could be more powerful than words, more cutting than any insult. I kept my gaze fixed on Mr. Sharma, the lawyer, who was adjusting his glasses with a deliberate calmness. "I, Arjun Kapoor, being of sound mind, hereby declare this as my final will," he began, his voice steady, measured. I closed my eyes for a brief moment, letting the words wash over me. Every syllable reminded me of Arjun's voice, firm, kind, and full of purpose. The will continued through the formalities, funeral arrangements, outstanding debts, and minor donations. Riya leaned back, visibly relaxing. She believed she had already conquered me, that she had inherited not just the house, but the life that had once belonged to me. Then came the section I had feared, the one that seemed designed to humiliate me. "I hereby bequeath all my known movable and immovable properties to my beloved wife, Riya Kapoor." Her smirk widened, triumphant. She glanced at me, eyes alight with vindictive joy. "See, Ma," she said softly. "I told you nothing is yours." I did not respond. I merely sat still, taking slow, deliberate breaths. My hands, though clenched around the photograph, were steady. I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. With the exception of any personal items belonging to my mother, Mira Kapoor, the lawyer added quietly. Riya laughed openly, a high, brittle sound that grated on my nerves. "I hope you enjoy being homeless," she sneered, leaning forward. "Because I made sure you get nothing." I didn't flinch, I didn't even look at her. I only waited. Patience had become my weapon. Mr. Sharma cleared his throat. "Please, Mrs. Kapoor," he said politely, "let me finish." But Riya ignored him, already envisioning herself walking through the rooms of the house, her new wealth and freedom surrounding her like a crown. She didn't notice the small tightening in the corners of my eyes, the quiet fire that had been building in me over these weeks. Then Mr. Sharma said, with deliberate gravitas, "There is one final section." Riya's brow furrowed in confusion. "What final section?" she demanded. The lawyer opened the sealed envelope and began to read aloud. His voice was low, deliberate, each word falling like a hammer. "If you are hearing this, it means I am no longer with you. Riya, I loved you deeply, but I have witnessed your cruelty toward my mother. I cannot allow her to suffer at your hands any longer. Therefore, all hidden investments, offshore accounts, and the deed to our ancestral home have been transferred under my mother's name. My mother, Mira Kapoor, now holds complete ownership." Ma, forgive me for not telling you sooner. I wanted to protect you from her wrath while I still could. Please use what I leave you to live with dignity and peace, and if Riya ever mocks you, smile. Because you now know the truth. I felt a strange mixture of grief and triumph. Grief because I had lost my son. Triumph because I realized that his love, even in death, had shielded me from Riya's cruelty. Riya's face went pale, her confident mask crumbling in real time. Her eyes widened, her mouth opening and closing as if she had forgotten how to speak. "No, that can't be," she stammered. The lawyer handed her the official documents, each one signed, witnessed, and certified. "All legal and valid, Mrs. Kapoor," he said firmly. "Everything mentioned in the final section is irrevocable." Riya swayed on her feet, her hands clutched at the chair, trying to steady herself, but the color drained completely from her face. He loved me," she whispered, a tremor in her voice, and then, the inevitable, she fainted, collapsing to the floor with a soft thud. I remained seated, my eyes fixed on the floor for a long moment, letting the tension drain from my body. Tears welled in my eyes, but they were not tears of triumph. They were tears of release, of sorrow finally meeting justice. For the first time in weeks, I breathed freely. I had endured betrayal, humiliation, and loss, but I had survived. And in that survival, I discovered a quiet, undeniable power, patience, dignity, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. As the lawyer helped Riya to a chair and the office staff whispered among themselves, I reached for my purse, tucked the photograph of Arjun against my chest, and allowed myself a small, private smile. The fight was over. The revenge, though quiet, had been delivered, and soon I realized my life could begin again. The office seemed to hold its breath as Riya lay slumped in the chair, pale and trembling. Her confidence, her cruelty, her smug triumph, all had crumbled in the face of the truth. I, on the other hand, remained seated, my hands resting lightly on my purse, my heart steady. I had survived weeks of humiliation, days of hunger, and nights spent staring at the ceiling of my small, borrowed room, wondering if I would ever feel safe again. And now, in this quiet, almost surreal moment, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel since Arjun died. Peace. Mr. Sharma cleared his throat and continued reading through the legal formalities, carefully listing each of Arjun's hidden investments, properties, and assets that were now officially under my name. Each line was a small, private triumph, a testament to the son who had loved me fiercely and protected me even in death. And finally, he said, lowering his glasses, Arjun Kapoor declared that his mother, Meera Kapoor, is not only the owner of all previously mentioned assets, but is also entitled to all accrued wealth from his personal ventures, which total approximately. He paused, letting the weight of the moment hang in the air. I straightened in my chair. I felt the familiar tremor of shock pass through the room, and I realized Riya was holding her breath. Her eyes, wide and uncomprehending, were fixed on Mr. Sharma. 23 crore rupees, the lawyer announced, each word deliberate and firm. Time seemed to slow. I watched Riya's mouth open, her eyes widening further, as if the words had physically struck her. She tried to speak, to form a sentence, but nothing came. Her perfectly styled hair, her pristine clothes, her carefully maintained image, none of it mattered now. She had spent weeks mocking me, dismissing me, relishing my supposed failure, and now the tables had turned completely. I leaned back in my chair, taking a slow, deliberate breath. A soft, almost imperceptible smile touched my lips. The years of patience, the quiet endurance, the heartbreak, and even the anger I had restrained, all of it had led to this moment. I hope this teaches you a lesson, Riya, I said softly, my voice steady, almost serene. Cruelty is temporary, justice is not. Her body shook slightly. She had been so certain, so confident that she had dismissed me entirely. and now she saw the truth I had survived. I had endured, and I had inherited not only what Arjun had left me, but the power and freedom that she had thought she could deny me. The staff in the office whispered among themselves, glancing between Riya and me. Some offered polite smiles, others simply stared in astonishment. I didn't care. My satisfaction was quiet, contained, dignified. I did not gloat. I did not mock. My revenge was in the truth itself, the life Arjun had secured for me, and the lesson Riya would never forget. When Riya finally recovered enough to sit upright, her face pale and drawn, she avoided my gaze. There was nothing left to say, no words that could erase the humiliation she had earned through her cruelty. I nodded politely at the lawyer, thanked him for handling the proceedings, and gathered my belongings. As I left the office, the sunlight felt warmer, the air fresher than it had in weeks. For the first time since Arjun's death, I felt a sense of control over my life. I had been knocked down, betrayed, and pushed to the brink, but I had risen again, stronger, wiser, and unbroken. I knew that Riya would remember this day forever, not because I had humiliated her in front of others, but because the truth, silent and unyielding, had spoken for itself. And in that truth, I found my victory, quiet, sweet, and enduring. I paused outside the office, looking up at the sky, letting the breeze touch my face. The city around me was alive, chaotic, and indifferent, and yet I felt a connection to it, a sense of belonging, a sense of future. For years I had been a mother, a widow, and a victim of circumstance. Now I was Mira Kapoor, a woman who had endured betrayal, heartbreak, and loss, and had emerged not only intact but triumphant. And though Arjun was gone, his love, his foresight, and his faith in me had given me the ultimate gift, not just wealth, but dignity, justice, and the knowledge that even in the face of cruelty, a mother's heart is indomitable. As I walked away, the sunlight catching the edge of my sari, I whispered softly, almost to myself, "Arjun, my son, we did it." For the first time in weeks, I smiled without hesitation, without sorrow, without fear, and in that moment I knew the world could never touch me again.